Hey fam, so today we're going to a September 11th memorial, so come join us.
Tonight we will hear from speakers representing our city departments, and we will listen to poignant letters from family members who had close connections to the attacks. Their words will remind us of the collective impacts of that day. Now, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the March of the Colors by the Orange High School Marine Corps JROTC Color Guard, and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Scout Troop 1475 and the singing of our national anthem by Miss Paloma Cortez.
Audience, attention. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Audience, at ease.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you. Now please remain standing for the invocation delivered by Ms. Heidi Bush, Orange Elks Lodge Chaplain.
Dear Lord, this evening we come together to honor all those affected by the tragic events 23 years ago. Not only do we remember the police officers, firefighters, and citizens who perished in the attacks, but also those left behind in the aftermath. Tonight, we remember how we came together as a nation, how churches, synagogues, and temples opened their doors to all people, regardless of religion, how strangers helped each other out, sharing what they could with those who had lost. Bless our ceremony, God, as we remember. In your gracious name, amen.
Amen.
It is now my privilege to, please take a seat. It is now my privilege to introduce to you the man in charge of our beloved city of Orange, who after his speech will set in place the flag adorned with the black ribbon in remembrance of all civilians and airline personnel who perished on that day. Please welcome Mayor Dan Slater.
Welcome. I want to begin by thanking the Elks Lodge, which I'm proud to be a member of, for facilitating and coordinating this important observance and event. So, when 9/11 happened, I never imagined that it would become so personal for me. Here I am, 3,000 miles away, and never been to New York, never been to New York City. So I had planned to go there in December after 9/11 with two friends for the very first time. 9/11 happened, they canceled. I said, I'm just going to go. And so I went to New York City. It was just after Christmas. And at that time, they had built a observatory deck and pathway overlooking the site, and there was still smoke rising from that site. We had to go there to see it. So all around the church that was in front of the site were all these letters and people desperately looking for their loved ones. So 2 years later, I happened to meet someone. Well, let me back up a little bit. My partner has many family members in New York City. One of them, his brother, a firefighter, was there at 9/11. Another cousin, a police officer, was there at 9/11. But 2 years later, I happened to meet a woman named Marta Peterson, and we made a quick acquaintance, and she put her house on the market, and I said, where are you going? She said, I'm moving to Manhattan. And I said, well, I happen to be going there again in December. And she said, well, I would love it if you came and visited me in my new home in Manhattan. And I said, I would love to do that. So, not knowing her very well, I wound up in Manhattan, and I was sitting in her living room, and she kept talking about her son, Davin. And I knew that Davin had passed, and I finally had to say, Marta, what happened to Davin? Well, she said, I thought you knew. He was in one of the Twin Towers. So, over the years, I got to know Marta a lot better. After many trips to DC and to New York, and after many trips for her coming out to visit me, I walked through the whole 9/11 experience. I went up to the high-rise that overlooked the site where they only allowed family members, and I saw the tributes to her son. As the 9/11 memorial took shape, I remember going to see where the waterfalls go into the two areas where the buildings used to be. Davin's name was engraved in stone on the side of that. Inside the memorial, there's a family section there too where she recorded her story about losing her son. On 9/11, I listened to that. And so take shape and get constructed. So for the very first time, we went to the observation deck on the top of that tower. And it's 100 floors, I believe. They built the building 1,776 square feet. Obviously there's a meaning to that. But looking down from that building, I thought about the resiliency of our people, our country, and there is no challenge that Americans face or that our people face that we can't rise up to and overcome. And that's what America is, standing together and working together to overcome challenges. So on this special day that we all observed the tragedy 23 years ago, I am so thankful that we pause to remember the sacrifices made by almost 3,000 people and hundreds since then who have died from diseases having gone to that site. But together we stand as a nation, and we will always stand together as a nation because we are America.
Thank you, Mayor. I would now like to introduce Fire Chief of the Orange City Fire Department to say some words, and who will deliver the flag adorned with the red ribbon, honoring the lives of all fire, paramedic, first responders on that tragic day. Please welcome Chief Sean Dimitropoulos. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to the Elks 1475 for putting on this event. I know it's a lot of work, but it's definitely truly appreciated. Today we gather to honor the memory of the brave men and women who lost their lives on the horrific attacks of September 11th, 2001. You know, this day is etched in our hearts, and it reminds us of the profound loss and the incredible heroism displayed by so many. The Orange City Fire Department stands with the nation in remembering those who perished. Each year we hold a solemn ceremony to pay tribute to their sacrifice. Our firefighters, along with community members, participate in a memorial service that includes raising the flag, a moment of silence, and the ringing of the bell. This tradition ensures that we never forget the courage and selflessness of those who gave their lives. Last year, I had the unique opportunity to be in New York on September 11th. The somberness of the city was palpable as people from all walks of life came together to remember and honor the victims. The atmosphere was filled with a deep sense of respect and reflection as we stood at the site where the Twin Towers once stood. The tribute and light illuminated the sky, symbolizing the resilience and unity of a city and a nation that we will never forget. It was a humbling experience that reinforced the importance of our annual remembrance here in Orange. The Orange City Fire Department's commitment to honoring the memory of 9/11 heroes is unwavering. Each year our firefighters participate in various events. Each act of remembrance not only honors the fallen, but also serves as a reminder of the bravery and dedication that define our first responders. It is through these acts of remembrance that we will keep the spirit of those that we lost alive. As we stand here today, let's remember the lives lost, the families changed forever by the events of September 11th. Let us honor the bravery of the first responders who ran towards danger to save lives. And let us commit to continue to carry on their legacy of courage, unity, hear from a captain of the City of Orange Police Department, who will, after his speech, plant the flag with blue ribbon in representation of all law enforcement officers who lost their lives on September 11th. Please welcome to the stage Captain Adam Jevick.
Good evening. On behalf of Chief Dan Adams and the men and women of the Orange Police Department, thank you to the Orange Elks for allowing us to participate in this special day of remembrance. December 7th, 1941. For the greatest generation, Franklin Roosevelt's pronouncement calling it a date which will live in infamy was something they would never forget. Over 20 years later, another generation would always remember where they were on November 22nd, 1963, the day Kennedy was assassinated. Many in my generation recall January 28, 1986, when the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded shortly after its launch. But September 11th is an event that all generations experience together. Alan Jackson's song, "Where Were You When the World Stopped Turning," encapsulated what many of us will never forget. Where we were, what we saw, and what we felt. We have a duty as Americans and survivors to remember September 11, 2001. To honor the courage of those who died saving others, and to remember the innocent lives lost. Events such as today are important so that we can teach those who are not witnesses about not only what the events from that day, but more importantly, what happened next. The story of America is one of resilience. December 7th, 1941 wasn't the end of the story. Jimmy Doolittle's raid on Tokyo on April 18th, 1942 happened next, followed by Midway, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. November 22nd, 1963 wasn't the end of the story. Later that same day, Lyndon Johnson was sworn in as the 36th president, standing next to Jacqueline Kennedy and ensuring the continuance of government and completing the 1 year and 59 days left of Kennedy's term. The space program did not cease to exist after Challenger. 32 months later, on September 29, 1988, Discovery launched the program back into space. It continues to do so, even after the Space Shuttle Columbia was also tragically lost on February 1st, 2003. So as we remember September 11, 2001, let's focus on what happened next. Many recall what happened next to the supporters of terror. We often speak about the unity and the support for our neighbors, the support for public safety, and the pride we felt for our nation. So today, as we remember yet again, this is a good opportunity to ensure our community about the readiness of the Orange Police Department, to ensure our community about the courage of the men and women who stand to protect you, and to remind you that we are ready for today and we are prepared for what happens next. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce someone very special to our gathering tonight. We are honored to have with us a past president of the Orange Emblem Club, number 418, an auxiliary club of the Orange Elks Lodge. She will be sharing with us a deeply personal story about her family member who was a New York City firefighter during the attacks on September 11th. Please welcome Mrs. Jan Janelli.
Bear with me, I edited it as much as I could to make it as short as I could, but I didn't want to leave out any important information. This is the story as told to me by my nephew, Ray Moss. The World Trade Center was a very large complex of buildings with a concourse of stores and parking garages below grade. All the subways and PATH trains converged under the Trade Center. It was a little city unto itself. The morning of the attacks, I was off duty. My wife came running in and put on the television. Tower 1 was smoking heavily. When did not know that a plane had struck the building. Then the second plane struck Tower 2. I told my wife, I have to go. I drove 20 miles to ladder 158 in Queens to get my gear. By this time, all of Lower Manhattan was consumed in a smoke cloud. We were directed to go to Cunningham Park in Queens, 20 miles from Lower Manhattan. Hundreds of firemen arrived. We commandeered the next bus. There were at least 50 of us on that bus ride into Manhattan. My head was spinning. When we arrived, all we heard was the muffled chirping sounds of all the pass alarms activated when a fireman is down. This went on for many hours. On my way to the tent house, I saw so many shoes on the sidewalks and streets. People were literally running out of their shoes. Then I came across one of the jet engines. I came upon Danny P. He was in shock because of all the jumpers. He was walking around in a daze. I had to shake him. He said, Ray, there were so many. The first fireman to die that day was hit by a jumper. His name was Fireman Daniel Soar. Radio communications were taken out when the planes went through the buildings. The men in Tower 1 did not know that Tower 2 had fallen. Many of the firefighters were still inside. When word finally reached them to evacuate, they headed down the stairs. But the lower they went, the more debris there was. A Port Authority maintenance worker yelled them, "Follow me, there's another way out." He led them to an exit right onto street level. Just as they emerged, they heard a very loud, thunderous rumble. Tower 1 was coming down. They ran for their lives. Those first few hours, the tent house became a triage to take care of any injured people, but there were none, no bodies. They brought in heavy equipment to move the large beams. We would follow behind them and dig with our hands. I never found one piece of glass, one piece of a desk or telephone. Everything was reduced to dust. The guys were working so hard on the pile. No one was eating. We were getting dehydrated to the point of exhaustion. Then we would go to the tent house, get hooked up to an IV bag. This would replenish us enough to go back to the pile. I left after midnight on the 12th. I was out of it. I had seen more than I ever wanted to see. I headed home to get some sleep. My skin and clothing were so caked with thick dust that my wife made me strip down outside and rinse off under the hose before I headed to the shower. I think I slept. I was back at the site by 7 the next morning. Early in the morning, the tent house became a command center. Keep in mind, we had done thousands of inspections on these buildings. We knew the whole underground layout. There were many unmarked stairwells that the Port Authority police used that were not open to the public. A few of us tent house guys decided to use those stairwells to come up from underneath to look for voids and possible survivors. We went to the subway station at the corner of Church and Liberty Street, followed the tracks to the Trade Center B1 level, which was now compressed. Our only means of descent was the space between the rails of the escalators. We slowly proceeded to a crawl in a 3-foot space down 5 levels. There were lean-to collapses and areas that were blocked and impassable. We found areas destroyed and areas totally untouched. We never found anyone. We made our way down to the PATH trains, 8 levels down. The tunnels were flooded. We finally found the stairwell to take us up, but it was gone, pile driven into the ground. Making our way out in the B4 parking area, which is a 16-foot high span, we were able to count 21 floors compressed together. After seeing this, we knew we were not going to find anyone, but we wanted to stay hopeful. Change of shifts happens between 8 and 9 a.m., so there were on-duty and off-duty guys in the firehouse. Many companies responded with many extra men. There are over 50 sets of gear at each firehouse. Quite a few off-duty firemen in the area were grabbing gear from the tent house and heading to the towers. The tent house was picked clean of all bunker gear. That made it very Proby found a set of keys and a letter in his locker. The captain read the letter. It was from an off-duty fireman who had written a quick note to his wife and children. This young man's name was on the captain's list of missing firemen. After reading the note, the captain, running on sheer adrenaline from complete physical and mental exhaustion, totally lost it and was taken home. At the end of the week, the tent house became the GPS unit. We were to mark every piece of equipment and 4 body parts that were found. So the dogs were brought in. There were so many of them. Even with their little booties on, their poor paws were getting all cut up from the twisted steel. When the dogs found something and signaled, I had to stand at that spot, and my GPS would print out the coordinates. I would then tag whatever body part or equipment was found. This was my job for the next 2 months. It was hard, quite mind-boggling and heart-wrenching, but it had to be done. I just worked until I couldn't, then went home and slept. I usually went back after a few hours of downtime. When we lose one man, it's heartbreaking. This many missing was inconceivable. This was so mentally draining. We were so hopeful we would find our guys. I knew 36 of them personally. The tent house lost 6 men. Firefighter Steve Stiller had transferred to a Brooklyn company. When the word went out about the attacks, he grabbed his gear and ran through the Brooklyn tunnel to the site. He never made it out. He left behind a wife and 5 children. They have a run for him every year now. It's known as the Tunnel to Towers Run. Jim Corrigan was captain of the tent house when I was a probie. He worked for the fire department for 37 years, then retired, and became a fire safety director at the World Trade Center. One of his last heroic acts was evacuating the nursery and making sure all the children were safely taken out of the building. Jim had the pleasure of watching his son get married just 3 days before. Both his sons became firemen since 9/11. The official number of firemen lost on 9/11 is 343. However, there were 3 retired firemen working as fire safety directors at the World Trade Center who also lost their lives on that day. The worst for me was the funerals, many days, 2 at a time. This was hard because they were all my friends and brothers. I spent months in therapy. Now I am retired in beautiful Denver, North Carolina, near Lake Norman. The firehouse right down the road is engine 10, ladder 10. How ironic. Thank you for listening.
Our final story to be shared today is one belonging to an American Airlines flight attendant who dedicated 39 years to the skies. The loss of her cherished friends and colleagues had a profound impact on her life. And she has agreed to share her story with us here today. This is the story of Pam Casella as told by Debbie Casella.
Today we gather to remember and honor the extraordinary courage and resilience of the many victims of September 11, 2001. When thinking of those who were described as heroes on that day, some of the first responses that come to mind are the firefighters and police officers, and rightfully so. However, hijackers. Flight attendants Sandra Bradshaw, C.C. Lyles, and others made the choice to take a stand against the terrorists and try to reclaim the control of their plane. Their actions prevented further destruction and loss of life. Additionally, on American Airlines Flight 77, Flight Attendant Ken and Jennifer Lewis, along with Renee May, called for flight services to describe what was happening inside their plane. They discussed the timeline of the events on board, including the hijackers breaking through the cockpit doors to take over the controls of the aircraft. The quick thinking of these flight attendants brought air travel to a stop and likely saved more lives both in the area and in the targeted cities. In honoring this special group of men and women, we remember their sacrifices and learn from their example. They confronted challenges with courage and supported one another in times of crisis. Truth be told, we can only imagine what actually happened on those planes. We can agree, however, that the poise and bravery of these flight attendants brought not only compassion to their passengers on board, facing the final minutes of their lives, but also valuable information and insight to those on the ground. Please keep their memories close on this September 11th. We can honor these flight attendants and all of the heroes from that fateful day by continuing their legacy of courage, selflessness, and commitment to others. May we never forget.
Ms. Pam Casella is here. Ms. Pam, can you rise, please? I got to hear some of her stories, some of her personal stories, and, you know, this lady's gone through a lot. She's gone to several funerals of her loved ones. Not only were these people that she worked with her family, but she also had friends that she would fly with on a regular basis that she became friends with. And she brought to my attention the fact that we don't always remember everybody. It's so easy to remember our heroes like the fire department, the police department, and all law enforcement agents and security personnel that were there on that day. But we tend to forget those first responders who were in those airlines contacting the ground and letting us know what was going on, keeping people abreast of the situations that were unfolding. And we tend to forget that. And I hope that today we've done them justice, Ms. Pam, and we continue to remember everybody that lost their life on that day. Thank you. And now the chaplain will close us in prayer.
Gracious God, thank you for blessing this ceremony and allowing us to pay tribute to all affected by the events of 9/11. God, we ask that you continue to protect our great nation from on high and that you give strength to those committed to protecting us here on earth. As we leave here this evening, remind us of how we as a nation were on September the 12th, when we focused on humanity and love for our fellow Americans. We lift up to you those who still suffer from the loss. May we continue to heal and help each other. In your holy name, amen.
Please be seated. Lastly, I'd like to thank our Mayor Dan Slater and the members of the City Council, Ana Gutierrez, District 5, Ariana Barrios, District 1, Kathy Tabulares, District 3, John Gillenhammer, District 6. I'd like to thank the City of Orange Fire Department Chief Dimitropoulos and Orange Truck Number 1 for being here in attendance and bringing that beautiful flag. Also thank Captain Jevick and the City of Orange Police Department, as well as the Women's Club and the Community Foundation of Orange for helping us with this event this year. Colonel Mark Toll of the JROTC program at Orange High School, he's doing an amazing job with those kids. So I'd like to thank him. Our Boy Scouts at good old 1475, Miss Paloma Cortez for the national anthem, and all the volunteers for their hard work and helping put together this event, but especially to all you in attendance for helping us keep the promise to never forget. We are now going to close this with Amazing Grace by our bagpiper, Dave Champagne.
So what did you think of that? I thought it was pretty good. I can't believe it's been 23 years since that day hit. I still remember where I was when my best friend called me and told me that the towers had been hit. Do you remember where you were? Leave a note down in the comments. Let me know. Hit like, hit subscribe. Let me know. And it's 1 week until our cruise. And then we'll be having a lot of fun. And we'll keep you updated on that. Alright. Thanks, fam. Peace out.